Cinematic, exciting, and honestly downright enthralling, Uncharted Drake's Fortune pretty much single-handedly set a new standard for the kind of experience the average consumer believed a video game was capable of delivering. Hidden treasures, globe-trotting adventures, bombastic set pieces, and high-octane Hollywood-level action set this IP apart from not only anything the developers over at Naughty Dog had made prior, but pretty much anything else on the market at the time. And yet, I've heard this particular game often referred to as the weakest entry of the series, and is regarded by some as outright skippable. Stiff combat controls, bullet sponge enemies, rage-inducing NPC spawns, painfully janking platforming on one or two occasions, and a handful of other quality-of-life issues have caused a great deal of frustration in players over the years, and as better games in the franchise hit the market, reverence for Drake's Fortune began to fade into resentment. So I wanted to go in, take a closer look at the original game, play through it in full, and really see how Uncharted Drake's Fortune has held up all these years later.
Sic parvis magna?
Greatness from small beginnings.
Shortly after Jak 3 was released, the studio over at Naughty Dog decided to split their team in half. One of the teams was dedicated to developing, realizing, and releasing Jak X Combat Racing. This would be Naughty Dog's epilogue to their Jak and Daxter series, and also their final game for the Sony PlayStation 2. The other team, made up of their best senior talent, was to focus strictly on their new IP. This new IP was originally only known as Project Big, and it was going to be their landmark title for Sony's 7th generation hardware, the PlayStation 3. So for a solid year after Jak 3's release, the studio was working on 2 games at once. And as the framework and foundation for Project Big was being developed, Jak X Combat Racing went gold and was shipped to market. And after that, the two teams were re-merged into one cohesive studio to bring all hands on deck for Project Big, which of course we now know as Uncharted Drake's Fortune. And they wanted this game to be their biggest one yet, the most ambitious heavy-hitter landmark title they had ever attempted, utilizing new development techniques, implementing new technologies, and trying to take full advantage of the advanced hardware of Sony's PlayStation 3. And of course, with this new IP, they wanted to introduce a brand new art style. Up until this point, Naughty Dog was really mostly known for their more cartoony, mascot-style visuals. If anyone ever mentioned the company Naughty Dog, the characters that would come to mind were Crash Bandicoot, Jak, and Daxter. But that was about to change, since Uncharted was going for something significantly more grounded, more believable. Of course, they didn't want to completely abandon the more fantastical signature style of previous Naughty Dog titles, but they did want it to feel more realistic. You know, for several years now, I've used this term to describe the kind of art style I'm talking about. I've used this term in a couple of previous videos because this kind of style is my favorite. That term being exaggerated reality. It turns out Uncharted's creative director, the brilliant Amy Hennig, had already coined a term that described exactly the thing I was trying to get across. When describing her vision for the world and tone of Uncharted, she used the term stylized realism, which is pretty much the same thing, but I do kind of like hers better.
It's a stylized reality, and there's a little bit of vividness in the colors that we're choosing, and everything's got this sort of larger-than-life quality.
This isn't some kind of grim military shooter, this is an action-adventure game. Two pieces of media they cited as enormous inspirations for Drake's Fortune were Indiana Jones and National Treasure. Now, I love those movies, but they're not exactly the most realistic, although they are grounded. I think describing Indiana Jones or National Treasure as stylized realism makes sense. And Uncharted feels like it belongs in a catalog right alongside Indiana Jones or National Treasure. This is a quintessential action-adventure game. The qualities about those movies that inspired the team were aspects like introducing big mysteries, spectacular what-if scenarios, incredible set pieces, and high-octane edge-of-your-seat action. And it wasn't enough for them that the game felt and played different from anything on the market, they needed it to look different too. Rather than the gray colors, bleak tones, and serious plots of other AAA games on the market, Uncharted Drake's Fortune was to have a more saturated, vibrant color palette of different greens and blues with a more optimistic tone, and a story that was as fun as it was sincere. They also wanted their characters, particularly their protagonists, to be more believable and relatable. Nathan Drake was intended to be an everyman, not hard-boiled and rugged with a massive arsenal of weapons like other GamePro tags, but more so a real guy who's constantly fighting not to fold under stress, relying on his tenacity, resourcefulness, and in many cases, his luck. Likewise, they wanted this same more realistic approach for all of their characters, even for their looks, as visually pretty much everyone in the game wears very common looking clothes. Although most of their outfits did undergo different iterations to lock in a balance of believable yet iconic. For example, the lead heroine, Elena Fisher, was actually a brunette for a large portion of the game's development, with her initially being conceptualized as a Spanish woman named Elena Vargas. Those earlier concepts for her design would go on to be reused on a different character in later games, but eventually her final design settled her as Elena Fisher, the blonde-haired hero we all know and love. As for our lovable, roguish hero himself, Drake was originally conceptualized as a more cartoonish but trope-heavy everyman hero character who would undergo multiple designs before eventually taking more inspiration from real-life actors that you may not expect, with two of the biggest cited inspirations being Johnny Knoxville and Cary Grant. This was to give him a comedic confidence juxtaposed with a strong air of sincerity and competence. Although Henning did go on to state that the vast majority of Drake's charm and personality ended up coming from his voice/motion capture actor, Nolan North, whom she has since stated became their biggest inspiration for the character's direction. And after seeing these actors at work in the behind-the-scenes footage and how wonderfully they embody these characters, I'd wager the same goes for every single one of them. Together, along with the rest of the eclectic cast, these characters would cement themselves as staples for an entire generation of video game entertainment across one of the medium's most popular franchises ever made.
Yeah, that'd be a great idea, but we don't exactly have a permit to be here.
What?
I'd even go so far as saying that the Uncharted trilogy are three of my favorite video games of all time. I've bought them, played them, traded them in, and then gone back and rebought them later just to re-experience them. Because yeah, they're just video games, but they are really more than that. These games are art pieces. And when it comes to the trilogy, I've played through each of those games multiple times throughout my life. But my first time experiencing them was actually out of order. It wouldn't be until several years after the PlayStation 3 actually released that I managed to get my hands on one. And because of that, the first Uncharted game I ever played was Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. And of course, because I liked Uncharted 2 so much, I ended up pre-ordering Uncharted 3, which was set to come out just a few months after I'd beaten the second game for the first time. And I still remember the day I got my hands on that game. I mean, who could forget a release date like that? So of course I played through Uncharted 3 and loved it, but at that point, I still had never played Uncharted 1 before, and it would be roughly a year after that point until I obtained a copy of Uncharted 1: Drake's Fortune. And even before I got my hands on the game, I was already keenly aware of its reputation as the weakest of the series. I had already read online and heard from friends that compared to 2 and 3, the first game was a far more rough experience, so that probably made me a lot more lenient to its flaws going into it for the first time. Because if I'm remembering correctly, my first time playing Uncharted Drake's Fortune, even after having played 2 and 3 already at that point, I was still blown away. I mean, I loved it. I didn't really find it all that jarring going from Uncharted 2 and 3 back to Uncharted 1. I thought they were pretty similar overall. Granted, comparatively speaking, this first game does have some flaws that the second and especially the third game managed to rectify later, but I still think this is a really good entry. Now, if you've been following this channel for very long, then you may be aware of how important video game preservation is to me. And so I've made a particular habit of checking in on a few of my favorite emulators every so often to see which games they can play, how the software is coming along, because that kind of thing really interests me. And when I decided to do this video on Uncharted Drake's Fortune, I figured this would be a phenomenal opportunity to check in on its emulation capabilities and see how it's coming along. And I've got some good news on that front, because Uncharted Drake's Fortune is completely playable start to finish on your PC via emulation. And I find this to be really important because as of recording this, Uncharted is still locked to console exclusivity. But with that said, playing this game through these means does come with its share of complications. Getting the game to run on an emulator is going to take some patience, as you'll be required to tweak through a bunch of different settings and manually implement all of the subsequent patches released for the game post-release. And for someone who isn't very familiar with the UI of their emulator, this can be a little bit frustrating to have to deal with. But with a tutorial or two and some patience, you'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly. Even with that being done though, playing the game through these means will come with some graphical issues and a troublesome frame rate. I mean, don't get me wrong, the game is still utterly breathtaking to experience pretty much no matter how you do it. In certain sections that are super polygon or asset heavy, it did look like the FPS was around maybe like 15 to 20, which isn't great, but in other sections, it was running at a smooth, crisp 60 frames per second. And in those beautiful sections with these upscaled visuals where the frame rate was staying consistent, it might be the best I've ever seen this game look. There's just something about playing a beautiful game like this on a PC that really does something for me. But in addition to that, there were more than a few occasions where the game's graphics would glitch out and show white textures or just struggle to load textures in at all. This was never really a major problem because these little graphical glitches would only ever last between half a second to a second before the game worked it out, but it did probably happen somewhere around a dozen times through a single playthrough. So yes, the game is completely playable this way, and if you're looking for an interesting way to try and re-experience this game again, this could be a good option for you. But with that said, I don't think I would recommend this method to someone who's never actually experienced the game before. This is more of a way to experiment with it and re-experience it for someone who's already played it. If you've never played an Uncharted game before, and you've been thinking about going back and starting with the first one and experiencing the whole thing straight through, or if you've only played later entries in the series and you've been thinking about going back and playing this one for the first time, I would probably recommend going through the Nathan Drake collection for that. That way, you'll get to experience a polished up version of the game complete with enhanced visuals and some much needed quality of life improvements. Doing it this way will also make it far easier to go straight from 1 to 2 and then to 3 since they play more similarly that way. So if you're new to the series and you have a PS4 or 5, go for the Nathan Drake collection. As for this emulated version, it did work shockingly well, and the so-called stylized realism is executed so exceptionally in this title that I'm not really sure how much better they could have gotten it at the time, even if they'd wanted to. This game still looks incredible to me, but back then, I mean, this was on another level.
Okay, what are you up to?
So I mean, yeah, you get it. The game looks great, but I think most of us already know that the thing Uncharted is most known for is its story. And there's a very good reason for that. This game's story is still easily one of the best action-adventure narratives you can find in a video game. From its charming characters to its epic plot, players around the world have been falling in love with this game for well over a decade. But Naughty Dog had already been known for its epic storytelling for years by this point after establishing themselves with more plot-heavy experiences like Jak 2 and 3. Uncharted was going to take that to another level entirely though by telling its story in a completely different way from those games. Gone were the days of open-world wandering and GTA-inspired mechanics. The game's way of telling its story was now moving in the opposite direction. This series is so linear and scripted that it's probably one of the first names that comes to mind when someone brings up the topic of linear scripted video games. Well, this or maybe Half-Life, or some of the more modern Sony exclusive titles. But that was fine, because the adventure it takes you on is so good that the scripted nature of it wasn't seen as restricting, but rather enjoyable, like a roller coaster. So of course, we're going to go over the narrative of Uncharted Drake's Fortune, and as such, I feel like I've got to go ahead and warn you, spoilers are ahead. Before we talk about the story of Drake's Fortune though, I'd also ask that you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment down below with your thoughts on the game. Not only do I love reading all of the comments where you guys tell me about your experiences with these old games, but also, these 3 interactions are like the pillars that keep my channel from being vanquished by the algorithm, so your involvement is very much appreciated. If you want to stay tuned in for my future coverage on the rest of this series and get in on it early, then consider becoming a member or a patron. Not only will you get exclusive early access to videos, but also extra content too. I love shining the spotlight back on these older games, and the support you guys give me is what allows me to share in this passion with you. Thank you, seriously. Now let's talk a little bit about the story of Uncharted Drake's Fortune. Setting the stage, the game opens with a camera panning across the bottom of the ocean floor as a quote appears on screen. That quote reads, "There must be a beginning of any great matter, but the continuing unto the end, until it be thoroughly finished, yields the true glory." Sir Francis Drake, 1587. I'm crazy about this opening. It's so great because it sets you up for everything the story is about to tell you. Now, something about me is I'm a little bit of a history buff. And even as a child, when I first learned about Sir Francis Drake and his pirate exploits for the English Navy, long before I had ever played this game before, I was in love with his story. I used to call him one of history's examples of a real-life superhero. So there probably is some bias from me there, but a game set around the exploits of Sir Francis Drake, even the fictional made-up ones that this game is going to tell us about, intrigued me so much. The adventures of Sir Francis Drake are such a cool moment in history, and they're really worth looking into for yourself if you're not familiar with them, considering all of it really did happen. The fact that we haven't gotten a good movie or TV series or even a video game that tells the real story of Sir Francis Drake is actually kind of shocking. We're then taken up to the surface to be introduced to our two protagonists, Nathan Drake and Elena Fisher. Nate is shown with a crowbar trying to pry the lid off of what he claims is the coffin of one Sir Francis Drake. All the while, Elena is recording these events with her camera. She's like a journalist slash TV personality. I don't think the game ever definitively states exactly what she is, but we do know she's getting footage for a special for some producers of hers. When asked how Nate could have possibly known where to find the coffin of Sir Francis Drake, Nate claims that he knew where to find the coffin of Sir Francis Drake because he himself is a descendant of the old knight. And because of this, due to an heirloom, he was able to deduce the exact coordinates of the coffin. Elena is doubtful of this claim, saying that Sir Francis Drake had no children. But Nathan quickly retorts that history has been known to be wrong.
Well, history can't be wrong, you know. For example, you can't defile an empty coffin.
What the hell?
Turns out Sir Francis Drake was not buried at sea, but rather utilized this coffin to hide his diary, which he later left the coordinates for others to find later down the line. Why did he do this? To leave a trail. We're getting to that. Elena wants to know what's in the journal, but Drake refuses to share, claiming that their contract was only for the coffin. The two argue back and forth a little bit before Drake realizes that they're about to have some company.
Right, to see every single thing
Could you hold that thought? Sully? We got some trouble. Hurry it up.
Okay, what's going on?
Pirates.
So this is the opening to the entire series of Uncharted. Stuck on a boat in the middle of the ocean being ambushed by a bunch of pirates. And modern pirates at that, so this isn't swashbuckling and sword fighting. They're packing heat. And this part's particularly amusing to me because he just hands Elena a 9mm and says, hey, do you know how to use this thing? Like, this woman's a journalist and now you're expecting her to start taking lives? But I mean, that's exactly what she does, and these are pirates who are coming to take their lives, or worse. So it's not like she's killing good people, I guess? And it's not like it matters because these two characters kill a lot of people across this game. Hey, you can't have an adventure without some conflict. I also can't overlook the little detail of their scuba gear being Otzel branded. It's nice to see that the studio is paying some homage to their previous titles. I really appreciated this detail. This sequence acts as the tutorial level, teaching the player how to utilize the cover system, take shots at pirates, and fight with melee combat. Yeah, the combat loop is really simple, but it's also really refined, which I would much rather have a simple idea very well executed than I would an ambitious idea that doesn't get handled properly. Anyway, our heroes are able to hold off the pirates for a while until a plane comes flying in. It's at that moment that they realize the boat is about to explode, so they abandon ship and start making their way over to said plane. This is where we're introduced to Victor Sully Sullivan, a longtime friend, associate, and mentor of Nathan Drake. And this introduction is handled flawlessly.
Well, if it isn't the beautiful and talented Elena Fisher.
Flattery will get you screen time.
Yeah, I'm more of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. Victor Sullivan.
I feel like anybody seeing this could probably tell that each of these characters was written with a great deal of love. This doesn't feel like dialogue being written to advance a plot, it feels like three characters interacting with each other. I'm just saying there's a reason people fell in love with these games. After getting back to shore, we see Elena on the phone with her producers trying to explain what happened to the boat and where she's at now with the project. Meanwhile, Nate and Sully discuss his findings in the journal. Nate claims that Sir Francis Drake's diary contains details for his final treasure hunt. That hunt being his search for El Dorado, the lost city of gold.
He was onto something big, all right.
Does it say anything else?
Oh, so now you're interested, huh?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, no. Last page was torn out.
For those of you not familiar with the history, the legend of El Dorado can be traced back to the writings of Spanish colonists in South America back in the 16th century. In these recordings, the Spanish claimed to have found a city with a king so rich, every single day he would coat himself head to toe in golden dust before diving into a sacred lake to wash it all off. Other details of riches and wealth were also recorded, and the legend began to grow out of control. This king's name was El Dorado, translated to mean the Golden One. But over time, as the legend spread, the name started getting applied more so to the city than to the king himself. Predictably, as more time passed and word of these writings spread throughout Europe, more and more people wanted to find this supposed city of gold, which saw many adventurers, treasure hunters, and travelers making their way over to South America in hopes of finding this king and his supposed lost city of gold. All of this is real, by the way. Like, it really happened. Now, I don't know if the king or the city itself really existed, that part's up for debate, but the writings about the king and the city were real, as were the many expeditions to try and find them. Although the stuff I'm about to start talking about, that's just made up for the game.
I'm telling you, Sully. This is it. This is finally it.
Yeah.
Such as Sir Francis Drake himself going on an expedition to find the lost city. Now, he did go on a lot of expeditions, including being the second person in history to make a complete circumnavigation of the planet in a single expedition. But the stuff about him going on a hunt for El Dorado, all of that is just made up for this game. Mostly, he just made existence for the Spanish a living nightmare. So much to the point that they gave him the nickname El Drake, which translates to the dragon in Old Spanish. Anyway, back to the game, Sully tells Nathan that they need to cut Elena loose, because he fears that if any word of what they found regarding Drake's journal and El Dorado gets out to the public, then they'll be fighting against every other treasure hunter and interested party on the planet to get there first. At first, Nate is really hesitant to do something like this, as he really likes Elena and wants to bring her along for the ride, but he eventually acknowledges that Sully is right, and they speed off, leaving her stranded on the port. Which takes us to South America. This is where the game really starts to try and flex its visual prowess. Following the information left in Sir Francis Drake's diary, Nate and Sully find themselves in the middle of an Amazonian rainforest. And I'm not exactly sure I'm doing justice to just how beautiful and detailed this environment looks. Seriously, it's gorgeous. After wandering around for a bit, the two eventually stumble upon the ruins of an ancient South American civilization. This is where we're introduced to Uncharted's second most prominent gameplay mechanic: climbing. Now, obviously, platforming has always been a major aspect of Naughty Dog games, with some elements of climbing even introduced in the Jak and Daxter titles. But Uncharted does things a little bit differently. I guess you could consider this platforming because you are jumping from platform to platform quite a bit, but you spend more time climbing across different surfaces than you do jumping across platforms. While in these ruins, Nate and Sully eventually find their way inside of some kind of ancient temple. And something I really want to note about this particular section is that I'm pretty sure it is the longest stretch of gameplay you will get with zero combat. It really is a solid 30 to 35 minutes of exploration, puzzle solving, and platforming before you get back to combat again. And I appreciate this a lot because it gives the player a chance to breathe after the intro was nothing but combat. And this is a way to slow things down and let the player get to know the characters and invest themselves in the world a little bit more before you start having them shoot everything for the rest of the game. But the real reason I wanted to make special note of this is that I'm pretty sure at one point in the game there was supposed to be combat here. Some of the concept art you can find in the game's menus depicts this early sequence from this level. Now, in the final game, all that happens here is they light the torches and continue on, but according to this concept art, at one point, the developers were hoping to make you fight a bunch of giant spiders. Something like this wouldn't have exactly been out of place in an Uncharted game, since there's plenty of mystical, mythical, and supernatural elements across the series. But it probably was a good idea to hold off on it for a while longer before totally jumping the shark. I'm imagining the developers probably figured a sequence like this would have fit better in the Jak and Daxter series, and I think they were trying to get away with that with this more grounded, realistic entry. So they opted against the giant spider sequence, and instead replaced it with more dialogue, exploration, and climbing.
What a warm and homey place, huh?
Well, not quite what you were expecting, huh?
Yeah. Where's all the damn gold?
Yeah, this place was picked clean centuries ago.
Once they get a bit deeper into the old ruins, it becomes readily apparent that this is not the lost city of gold. Nate finds a bunch of really old Spanish gear lying around and quickly deduces that they had beaten even old Sir Francis to this location long, long ago. And Sully is not too happy about it. Since he's accumulated a ton of debt, he was really counting on them being able to find something of value down here. After pressing on a bit deeper into the ruins, they find a room covered in carvings and images. This is where they learn the truth about El Dorado. It was never a lost city of gold, it was a golden man, i.e. a giant golden statue, an idol. Sully is pondering what something like that might be worth, while Nate just wants to know where it is. Finding some drag marks on the ground and deducing that the Spaniards had taken it away from this location, with nothing better to do, they opt to follow these drag marks and see where it takes them. Through a little bit of jungle and around a few corners, they find a massive waterfall with an old German U-boat stuck on the edge of it. I know I keep saying it, but this looks so good. This is one of the best looking sequences in the entire series for me. So there's a few questions about what's going on right now, and Nate decides the only thing they really have to do is go check it out. So he does some climbing, makes his way over to the top of the German U-boat, and enters it to see what's in there. Unsurprisingly, there's some old equipment and a few long since dead skeletons lying around. But the real find is a page that was torn out of Sir Francis Drake's diary and a map that points out a specific southern tropical island as a destination. Nate concludes this has to be where the statue was taken and is at the very least the best lead they have. This is where he loses contact with Sully over the radio and figures he better get back to him. And on the way out, he accidentally triggers a torpedo.
That's probably bad.
So this is where Nate makes a prompt exit and goes to reunite with Sully, where we're introduced to our two main villains of the game.
Hello.
Hey! Friends of yours, Sully?
I'm Gabriel Roman.
Yeah, I know who you are, asshole.
Manners, young man. This is just business.
Get over there. Easy. Put your hands up. Hi, they're up.
This is Gabriel Roman and Atok Navarro. We don't get a ton of information on either of these characters, but what we can put together is that Gabriel Roman is some kind of British crime lord who has clearly loaned Sully a great deal of money. Atok Navarro is his right-hand man and some kind of mercenary leader. In a desperate act to buy himself some time, Sully lets slip that they were onto something big, and now Navarro and Roman want a part of it. That something being El Dorado. Because they heard everything over the radio, Nate turns over the map to El Dorado's supposed location to Roman, who, in order to send a message, shoots Sully in the chest.
He's got nothing to do with...
Sully! Sully! You son of a bitch!
And now we're back into some action gameplay. And we get a pretty cool sequence of Nate running into the jungle while getting shot at, trying to survive and get away long enough to hopefully get a head start on finding El Dorado before Roman and Navarro can. And fortunately, he was able to grab that map before it all went down. After getting a bit deeper into the jungle, he runs into Elena Fisher, who had somehow tracked them to this same forest and was hot on their trail.
That's for leaving me at the dock.
What the hell are you doing here?
Listen, I'm a good enough reporter to follow a couple of no-luck tomb robbers.
He went this way. I radio ahead.
Then, with Elena's help, Nate has to shoot his way back through the temple he and Sully had ventured through to get here. This is just under an hour into the game at this point, and it's the first time things open up into what will become Uncharted's baseline gameplay loop. Run into an arena, take cover, shoot bad guys, rinse, repeat. But fortunately, the combat's pretty good. Everything works as you would expect, it feels satisfying to play, but if you find yourself playing through this bit and not liking how the combat feels, then you're gonna have a rough time for the rest of the series, because this is most of it. Once they get back through the ruins, Elena takes Nathan to the jeep that she had come here on, and the two go back and find Sully's seaplane where they're going to take to that island. On the way there, Elena is seen recording snippets of herself talking about the adventure in preparation for the TV special she wants to do, while Nathan pilots the plane, which is about the time their engine gets knocked out from anti-aircraft fire coming from the island.
Whoa! What the hell was that?
An anti-aircraft fire? This is so not cool!
Oh crap! We're on fire!
Enough with the damn camera! We gotta bail out!
Bail out? Does this thing even have parachutes?
Now would be a good time to look.
Elena scrambles to find them both parachutes before both of them bail out of the plane and descend towards the island. This will be the location that the rest of the game will take place on. So while technically it is a globe-trotting story, 80% of the game takes place on this one island.
Shit.
But I think that's fine because all of the different locales you see on this island are pretty visually distinct and very interesting. So with Nathan now stranded alone on this island, he quickly realizes he left the map on the plane. So our first order of business is to fight our way across this island, find the plane, and get the map back, which is actually one of my favorite parts of the game. I would actually say all of the best parts in Drake's Fortune are in the first and third acts. Most of the game's biggest criticisms can be found in the game's second act, but we're getting there. Turns out some kind of pirate gang is already inhabiting the island. There's hundreds of them here, and all of them are trying to kill Nate. Eventually, he manages to find the plane's wreckage and get the map back, but with one problem solved, another one presents itself. Nate spots Elena's parachute caught on a tower in a massive old fortress just across the way. We're left to put together that this fortress was built here by the Spaniards who brought El Dorado to this island and colonized it. And it's also one of the most iconic parts of the game. I'm not really sure why this is, but ever since I played Drake's Fortune for the first time well over a decade ago, anytime I think about it, it's this sequence of climbing the side of the fortress that immediately comes to mind. And I'm pretty sure a lot of other people share this sentiment. I don't know what it is, something about it feels, I don't know, climactic, grand, epic. It's just a really cool sequence. The only other games I can think of that have ever had something even remotely similar to this would be the Assassin's Creed games. While in the fortress looking for Elena, Nate stumbles upon another clue left from old Francis Drake.
Whoa. Fletcher, we have gone to the Great Tower. I pray that you... Wow. So you made it.
A small map of the fortress with some iconography from the island and a message to an apparent colleague named Fletcher. So Francis Drake had left this message to inform his colleague that he was going to some kind of great tower, which means Nate and Elena are indeed still on the right track. And we get some more great visuals, and this one is particularly cool because we can see this enormous lake with this big mausoleum building in the distance. This is relevant because the game is literally showing you a location you're going to end up at later. So it's really cool that it's kind of subconsciously giving you an internal map of the location, even if the players don't know that it's happening. Shortly after this, Nate finally spots Elena getting more footage on her camera when he sees a couple of pirates getting ready to kill her. He tries to stop this from happening, but gets himself knocked unconscious in the process. He then finds himself waking up to rocks being thrown at him before realizing he's in a jail cell.
I doubt you're gonna find El Dorado in there. How'd you get yourself in this mess?
Trying to rescue you, as a matter of fact.
Oh, that's so sweet. Traditional sandstone, brick, and stucco. Limestone mortar, huh?
How'd you get to know so much about this?
My show, Episode 4, Architects of a New World. Yep, it'll just take a tug to pull these bars out.
What?
Elena seems to have found him in quite the predicament, and she claims that she can get him out of there with a little bit of leverage. But after she runs off to go find said leverage, Nate is then confronted by the leader of these pirates.
Drake.
Eddie Raja. I should have guessed.
Fascinating document, huh? Seems like this Sir Francis was in my line of work.
Don't flatter yourself, Eddie.
Always ready to be enemies, eh? Tell you what, lead me to the gold, and I just might let you live.
Turns out they know each other, and although we aren't given any details as to exactly what the dynamic of their relationship is, we do know they don't seem very friendly towards one another. More than likely, one cheated the other out of something, and also more than likely, it was Drake doing the cheating.
How much trouble could one girl be?
Well, come on!
Thank you.
Hey! Damn it!
Nice work.
Thanks.
Once again, just narrowly snatching that map back after losing it, we get a pretty cool on-the-rails vehicle section where Elena is driving the Jeep and Nate is on the machine gun/grenade launcher. We're swarmed with a bunch of enemy pirate vehicles trying to wipe us out, all the while the landscape around us is meticulously well designed to be as climactic as possible. While trying to get away from their pirate pursuers, Elena narrowly prevents the Jeep from flying headfirst into a nearby river, leaving them cornered by Eddie Raja and his gang of pirates. After a fairly half-hearted attempt at negotiation, Nate very quickly pieces together that their only option is to run, and so he takes desperate measures.
Well, hand it over.
Well now, you told me not to move. Looks like you're gonna have to come get it.
This is where we enter the second act and arguably worst part of the game, the Drowned City section. Most of the critiques and criticisms around Uncharted Drake's Fortune are most readily apparent in this act. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it's pretty rough. And that's really unfortunate because just like everything else in this game, visually it's spectacular. The aesthetic of all these ancient buildings being completely flooded like this and fighting across this terrain while pirates are trying to shoot at us, it's brilliant. It looks great. The experience is also super cool, but playing through it is just really frustrating. At this point in the game, unless you're some kind of achievement or trophy hunter, there is absolutely no reason to play on any difficulty other than easy. I was still playing on normal at this point, and it was a mistake because you gain nothing, it's not more challenging, it just makes all of the enemies more bullet spongy. There's no reason, there's no point to play on a higher difficulty. It's not challenging, it's just annoying. So if you are thinking about going back and playing Drake's Fortune, just play on easy. I should not have to shoot every single random pirate with 8 different 9mm rounds in order to put them down. And outside of the enemies being bullet spongy, the spawns across this area are atrocious. And the jet ski vehicle sections are even worse. Alright, the jet skis. Let me back up a little bit. So this is the point where Nate has decided it's not worth it and he wants to abandon this treasure hunt. Elena is still set on finding El Dorado, but Nate has completely given up. Which makes sense, they're totally unequipped and completely outnumbered. This is a great dynamic, because one of the things the team wanted to do with Elena is make her kind of like the female version of Nathan Drake. So this is one of the instances where we see Nate giving up. And it's Elena who steps up and reminds him, hey, we can do this, let's make it happen.
Are you giving up?
Maybe you hadn't noticed, but we're kind of outnumbered.
We're doing fine so far.
I don't know.
Elena, I don't need your bullet-riddled corpse on my conscience. Let's go.
Oh, please. You quit if you want to, but don't use me as an excuse.
Fine. It's me, okay? I am quitting. Are you coming or not?
So that's it. You're just gonna forget about the treasure and forget about Drake?
This is why these characters play off so well together. In a way, this almost emulates what a real relationship is like. Most of the time, when one starts to slip up, it's the other one that comes in and fills the gap. And it's cool to see Elena embodying her role and emboldening Nate. They really do have a great dynamic. It's no wonder these characters are so beloved.
Wait. This time, I drive.
Okay.
Which leads us to the jet ski part. This is one of very few vehicle sequences across the Uncharted franchise where you control the vehicle. As Nate, you control the direction and speed of the jet ski, while simultaneously controlling Elena to aim and fire a grenade launcher. This is to take out all of the pirates positioned in the various buildings shooting at you, and also the horde of orange exploding barrels. And look, I could probably rant about these exploding barrels for like 25 minutes, but I'll shorten it to this. The complete and outright removal of every exploding barrel from this jet ski sequence would only improve it. You would lose nothing. It would be more fun, it would look better, it would play better, it would be way more climactic, and it would pretty much remove all of the frustration of this sequence while still leaving the challenge of it. And it's not even very long, you can beat the whole thing in like 8 minutes. The reason it's such a big problem for me is that it's so cool in theory and could be one of those things that makes this game unique and iconic. But instead, it's just a drag, and every time I've ever played this game, I've hated this part. And I want to like it. Driving a jet ski through a flooded city while shooting grenade launchers at pirates is cool, but it just doesn't feel good because I have to stop every 2.5 seconds to shoot an exploding barrel. This isn't the only sequence we use a jet ski. There's one other set piece later that's much better, but it still has that exploding barrel problem. Anyway, back to the story. After pushing deeper into the flooded city, Nate and Elena find the customs house. Inside of this customs house, they find a ledger showing that the statue of El Dorado very much did pass through here. And it also details that the object was moved further inland up into the mountain. Elena gets fired up and wants to keep pursuing the statue, but Nate still isn't convinced and wants to find a boat and get out of there while they're still alive. Oh yeah, and did I mention this game has quick time events? I think they're fine. They're passable as far as QuickTime event sequences in video games go, but I do find their inclusion to be a bit odd. And the reason is because despite this game being insanely cutscene heavy, these quick time events only show up like 3, maybe 4 times in total. And so you're never really expecting them because every 10 or 15 minutes you're getting another cutscene, and most of the time there's no quick time events. So I was always caught off guard when they popped up, but because they are pretty merciful with their timing, I don't think I missed any of them. I don't really think this is a negative for Drake's Fortune, but it is something I wanted to bring up. Although next is the Mausoleum, and I think this might actually be the worst part of the game. The precise way that the enemies and cover are spread out in this level makes it immensely frustrating to deal with. I had to replay this over and over again, and each time I was getting pushed further and further back. It got to the point where I was immediately going down the stairs and trying to hide in a corner and just take a few shots off where I could, because an enemy spawned basically on top of me while this was happening.
See that?
I hit him!
And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's lazy NPC spawning. Right before you enter this room, you're shown the entrance you came through being destroyed. So there's no way this guy could have gotten over here. It's just really obvious that they were spawning enemies behind you so that you would get shifted into the center of the room and feel like you were getting shot at from all sides. But it's also kind of lazy. Although once you kill everybody in the mausoleum, you can say goodbye to the flooded city sequence and enter the third act. I would say it's pretty much all uphill from here, but that is subjective. Right as they make it to the boat that Nate was hoping to take off the island and go home, Elena desperately tries to get Nate's attention. She has something she wants to show him on the camera before they leave.
What?
Don't forget your stuff on the dock.
And... hello. He's alive.
Huh.
Hurry up.
I don't know, Nate. I mean, how much do you trust this guy? It's not exactly like they're holding him at gunpoint.
I know.
We got to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, it seems weird.
So it turns out old Sully is alive. But while Nathan was watching that footage, their ticket off the island just sped off. So after a brief conversation, the two come to terms to continue the search for El Dorado, find Sully, and figure out what's going on.
Northish. Yeah, towards the mountains.
Okay, it's gotta be the monastery. Let's go.
What if it turns out he's working with them?
We either rescue him, or we beat the crap out of him. Hell, I might just beat the crap out of him anyway.
And on their way there, in the process of trying to cross a rickety old bridge, Elena loses the camera.
Watch where you step. Some of these boards are really falling.
Elena, I can't hold on! Give me your other hand! You've got to let it go!
Damn it!
So all the evidence of everything they've been up to is now gone. Which leads us to that other jet ski sequence I was talking about. And this one is much better. First off, again, it just looks fantastic. And getting to drive a jet ski up these intense looking rapids is really cool. And there's less exploding barrels, although they're still there. The sequence would be way better without them, I stand by that, but it's fine, I guess. Making it to the end of this river, they ditch the jet ski and enter some more ancient ruins. And while making their way deeper inland through the woods towards where they think they should be going, they stumble across something unusual. The body of one of these pirates impaled on some kind of homemade jungle trap. At first, they're not sure what to make of it, but Nate quickly realizes that this trap was assembled utilizing wreckage from the plane that they came in on. Which is weird in its own right, but then Nate spots some very odd-looking footprints in the mud that suggest something unusual is going on. But whatever it is, there's not much they can do, so they continue to push forward. Eventually, they manage to find a small village built around an enormous monastery left here by the Spanish colonists. And inside of that monastery is Sully hanging out with a couple of Navarro's mercs.
What the hell's taking you so long anyway?
Well, maybe you hadn't noticed, but most of these books are half rotten and written in Spanish.
Yeah, well, hurry it up. The boss is waiting on you.
After taking out the mercenaries that were holding Sully hostage, Nate asks him to explain himself. Roman really did shoot Sully in the chest intending to kill him, but the bullet got lodged in the diary of Sir Francis Drake that Nate had left with Sully when he dived into the water to go explore that German U-boat. And because the diary had miraculously saved Sully's life, he managed to convince Roman and Navarro to let him help them find El Dorado. But his real plan was to feed them as much useless information as he could to stall them from finding the treasure and buy himself time until he could figure out how to get out of there. Although while he was researching to find the treasure for Roman, one of the things he learned is that the Spanish marked their treasure vaults with specific symbols, which leads us to several more little puzzle sequences. Again, I really like the puzzle sequences in this game. It really gives off that feeling of being a treasure hunter adventurer.
Nate, be careful.
Come on. I always am. Ah! I did not see that!
While looking for the treasure vault, they find a hidden passage into some underground catacombs. Nate gets separated from Sully and Elena while trying to enter though, and we do get another nice little solemn breathing moment here. And while Nathan is trying to navigate his way through these underground catacombs, he actually ends up overhearing a conversation between Roman, Navarro, and Eddie. While listening in, Nate learns that Roman had hired Eddie and his gang of pirates to occupy the island, kidnap Nate and Elena, get his hands on the map, and turn it over to Roman and Navarro. In exchange, he was to get a share of the treasure once they found it. Although because Nate and Elena were able to escape Eddie's grasp, Roman is now doubting his abilities. Eddie doesn't even care about this anymore because he's convinced that the island and treasure are cursed. His men are apparently being killed left and right by some kind of supernatural force, and Eddie is ready to just call it quits and get off the island. After linking back up with Elena and Sully, the trio finally finds the entrance to the underground treasure room. Although, while entering the vault, a trap separates Sully from Nate and Elena, leaving them to explore the vault alone. Something I said earlier was that at times the game's platforming was a little bit janky. Well, this was the part I had in mind. I'd say for the most part the platforming in Drake's Fortune is great. And even this part's mostly pretty good, but there's a few sequences that are really bad. Particularly these spiked pendulum traps. There's a couple of little minor annoying things like this, and they're really only in this one room. But this is also the big final Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade challenge type room, if that makes sense. And while doing the platforming and solving the puzzles in order to progress deeper into the vault, Nate not only catches something strange out of the corner of his eye, but also realizes that Eddie and his band of pirates have chased them down here. So we get some more combat for a while before Nate and Elena find themselves in a large circular antechamber. Seems like at one point this room may have been filled with treasure, but now it's been pretty much picked clean. Although Nathan does find something pretty special down here, the deceased body of one Sir Francis Drake.
It's Drake. He never found it. He just died here. So much for greatness.
Finding the body of one of his heroes and possible ancestors like this, Nate assumes that he never found the treasure and simply died here in the vault looking for it.
Are you ready to get moving?
Yeah. More than ever.
This is where the game takes a major turn. As Nathan's old pal Eddie comes running into the vault after them with some of his pirates, the men are very visibly spooked and panicked about something. Do you remember when I mentioned a little bit earlier that these Uncharted games are totally comfortable with throwing wacky supernatural things at you out of nowhere? Well, here you go. These strange mutated creatures are the descendants of the Spanish colonists who settled this island back in the 16th century. Turns out the curse of El Dorado is real, and this is the result. Nate helps Elena get up to the upper levels to go find a way for him and Eddie to follow, while the two of them stay behind in this circular room to try to hold their own against all of these mutants attacking them from all sides in the meantime. This is actually a pretty tense sequence, and if you've never played the game before, this twist is pretty cool. And although the two put up a pretty good fight together, Eddie doesn't make it out of here alive.
Eddie, hold on!
You have got to be kidding me.
Elena, hurry up!
Shortly after Eddie's demise, Nate reunites with Elena, and the two sprint down a long hallway while being chased by the mutants before finding a door that they can go through and seal off behind them. This is another of the game's twists. That German U-boat we found near the beginning of the story wasn't a red herring. Long after the Spanish had found and settled the island, the Germans also found the island in the midst of World War II. So they built a small submarine base here to host their operations while they searched for El Dorado. This is where Nate and Elena have to split up again for a while since she can't do the kind of climbing acrobatics he can and the elevator is offline. So Nate climbs his way across to the other side of the base, enters the bunker, and tries to find that generator to get those elevators running. Now, Uncharted definitely isn't any kind of horror game, but during this specific sequence, it does kind of flirt with horror elements. The nature and speed of these monsters makes them very threatening, and once you get the generator running again, alarms start blaring and red lights start shining all over the place. While you're trying to fight these things off and get the elevators back online, it's pretty tense. Like, it's not horror, but it's kind of a horror-adjacent scene. This is another one of those really unique things about Drake's Fortune that you never see in the series again. And it's another reason why I say this is not a skippable entry. With the power back online and the elevators running again, Nate stumbles across a projector casting some kind of film footage against the wall. The Nazis really did find El Dorado after all. Resting beside the projector is a note written by Sir Francis Drake just before he died. It's obvious he had it on his person when he died, and the Nazis found it and took it into their bunker. In that note is where Nate learns the truth about everything. Nathan was wrong in his assumption that Francis hadn't found the treasure. Turns out he did find the treasure, and along with it, all of the cursed colonists. Realizing just how dangerous the treasure of El Dorado really was, Francis Drake took it upon himself to sink all of the ships in the surrounding area, blow open a dam to flood the local city, and try his best to hide the cursed treasure from anyone ever finding it. And it probably would have worked if he hadn't been leaving clues and breadcrumbs the entire way up to that point. And like I said, I really like the horror game tone of this one tiny little section. I'm pretty sure you really do only ever get a sequence like this in this one game, and it's just another quality of Drake's Fortune that makes it so unique. On his way back to go meet up with Elena again, he sees that she has been taken captive by Roman, Navarro, and their mercenaries. There's a small confrontation cutscene here with Roman telling Nate that they'll be holding on to Elena in order to discourage Nate and Sully from attempting to pursue. Although there's no microphone on Nate's end, so it's kind of a one-way conversation.
So long, Nate. It's been fun.
Yeah. Keep smiling, asshole. I'll see you soon.
After this, we get one more sequence down here in the bunker where Nate fights his way through a kind of mini skirmish between Navarro's mercenaries and the mutant colonists. I had already switched the game's difficulty to easy at this point, and this part was still giving me a little bit of trouble. But throughout the entire playthrough, I was trying to prioritize making the gameplay look cool and cinematic over actually playing well. So I ended up figuring out that the best way to get through this part is just by doing what I thought Nate would actually do and run straight through it, allowing them to deal with each other. Once Nate finds a ladder out of the bunker, he takes a winding path which leads him straight back to the courtyard of the monastery where he links back up with Sully. There's another arena battle here against more mercenaries, but this one is particularly cool because of the incredible red-tinted lighting of the dawn. I'm trying not to repeat myself a million times about how good this game looks, but the visuals really are a huge part of the experience. After clearing out the courtyard and making one final push through the interior of the monastery itself, Nate and Sully discover that the treasure they've been searching for has been right under their noses for the last several hours. A secret hidden passageway leads directly beneath the monastery, taking them to an underground chamber where they finally lay eyes on the lost statue of El Dorado. And then right after that, they're ambushed and taken captive at gunpoint by some of Navarro's mercenaries.
You two should realize by now that I plan for every contingency. Now drop your weapons.
He's still got a barrel pressed to Elena's head, and Roman has beat them to the treasure. Having to admit their defeat, Nate and Sully toss their weapons into the mud. Roman then decides to gloat a little by strutting around the statue and admire the craftsmanship of its design. His right-hand man Navarro then reveals that what he sees there is only a shell, and that the real treasure of El Dorado lies inside. And after convincing his boss to open the statue, watches in real time as it curses him and turns him into a mutant zombie thing. He then briefly explains that it's been his plan all along to find the statue and sell it to the right buyer, not for its worth as a golden piece of treasure, but for its worth as a bioweapon. So after all of that happens, Navarro's men begin extracting the statue via helicopter as he drags Elena up a staircase. We then get to play a sequence of Nate pursuing after Navarro with a SPAS 12 shotgun, killing mutants and his mercenaries before jumping across a small gap in order to grab onto the statue and follow it out. His only concern right now is keeping that statue from leaving the island. This leads us to our big climax level of the game as the helicopter flies above a large freighter ship it's going to drop the statue off on along with Drake. This final level is... There's things I like about it, and then there's things that I don't. Once again, visually, of course, it looks great. And then conceptually, it's pretty cool, fighting across a freighter as it's pouring down rain with the red light of the sun splashing down across the environment. But it's also built out kind of like a boss battle, except you can't actually damage Navarro. The only way to actually progress is to kill the mercenaries surrounding him, and then he'll retreat further back into the freighter and you follow after him. And you have to do this 3 times in a row, and it's the same all 3 times. The good thing about this is it's once again demonstrating Naughty Dog's impeccable understanding of the rule of 3s. The bad thing about this is that it's kind of boring. As far as epic action-adventure game climaxes go, I don't really love the fact that you're just sitting behind a box in cover, picking off mercenaries to force the boss to retreat 3 times in a row. So yeah, it's not the best ending fight I've ever seen, but it's definitely not the worst. Once you push him all the way back to the helicopter where Elena is, you get one final sequence where you have to time your movements in order to close the gap and initiate the final cutscene, which really just turns out to be a longer than usual QuickTime Event fistfight cinematic. I guess I don't really hate this, but I do kind of feel like it would have been better if we had just gotten a really well choreographed cutscene instead of interjecting the QuickTime Event button prompts in there. And I don't even dislike QuickTime Events. I'm actually one of the few defenders of them. I think they're a cool way to keep players engaged, but I just don't really know that Uncharted is a good match for that system. Anyway, Nate rushes over and realizes that Elena is okay before pulling her out of the downed chopper.
Come on. Can you stand? Okay, come on.
Okay.
You all right?
Oh, Nate!
Adios, asshole.
And that's the last we'll hear of Gabriel Roman, Atac Navarro, or the lost treasure of El Dorado. And now finally, after all of that, our 2 heroes can have one final moment together.
Here, I thought you might miss this.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You two got a funny idea of romantic.
Sully! Wow, you look like hell.
You should see the other guys.
I actually think it's a pretty nice touch carrying over that old tradition from the Jak and Daxter games. And although Nate and Elena initially believed they were leaving mostly empty-handed, Sully reveals that the boat he decided to borrow off a couple of pirates was already loaded with treasure. And so the 3 board the small boat and sail off into the sunset, or I guess rather the sunrise. And that's the story of Uncharted Drake's Fortune. And I think it's great. No, actually, I think it's better than great. I think it's one of the greatest available narratives in a video game. Sure, it's not overly nuanced or complex or loaded with different layers. It's very simple. But the version of simple that it is executed to basically perfection. It's tight-knit, it's well-crafted, it's exciting. And most importantly, all of the characters are lovable and genuine and fun. They're heroic and capable and competent, but they're not flawless. They have moments of error and self-doubt. And most of the time, it's the characters driving the plot forward rather than the other way around. But despite loving the story, I can of course find a few nitpicks in it. I mean, for one, the way these characters react to a lot of these situations ranges from jarringly unbelievable to outright sociopathic. And I'm mainly referring to the amount of people they all kill across this adventure. I mean, there's of course a little bit of ludonarrative dissonance there. You kind of have to accept the fact that the characters aren't actually killing the same number of people that the player is in the game. And even outside of taking the whole ludonarrative dissonance thing into account, canonically speaking, I'm pretty sure they still killed a lot of people here. That's not to say that these violent pirates, pillagers, and mercenaries were particularly good people or anything, but still, Elena's initial reaction to being handed a 9mm and told to kill people is surprisingly nonchalant.
Do you know how to use one of these?
Yeah, it's like a camera. You point and shoot, right?
Good girl. Here we go.
And another nitpick I have is, how did Navarro know about the Curse of El Dorado? The first time we as players ever hear about it is from Eddie when he's talking about his men all being wiped out by some mysterious force on the island. And it isn't until the characters themselves actually see and interact with the mutants themselves that it becomes readily apparent what's going on. So that left me wondering, did Navarro already know about the Curse of El Dorado going into it, or did he start formulating that plan last minute after he had heard about the curse? Like, how long was he planning on betraying Roman? Did he start thinking about who might buy the mutagen as a bioweapon like an hour before he did it, or was it much longer before then?
You are so pathetic. All of you, scrambling around for your petty treasures. Do you have any idea what this is worth? To the right buyer?
But something I did learn about when I was doing my research on the game for this video is that at one point in time there was supposed to be a chapter in between the Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 that we got, taking place back in the Amazonian rainforest in South America, where after thinking Sully had just been killed, Nate and Elena were going to have to go find and retrieve his seaplane. This was supposed to involve a kind of mini boss battle, where Nate had to knock out an armored truck that Navarro was in manning a machine gun by knocking over a telephone pole and crushing the truck. This whole sequence was cut in development though, and so it never manifested into the game. But it does make me wonder if there was any additional story or narrative context for Navarro's character in that missing chapter. But anyway, even as it is, I love this game's narrative. The premise, the twist, the MacGuffin, the locations, the set pieces, the action, everything about it. And you know what else? They somehow managed to make a plot about chasing a MacGuffin be almost entirely character-driven. You know how impressive that is? Well, I mean, actually, it should be relatively easy, but it is very rarely done correctly. And in this case, it's not only done correctly, but arguably optimally. The character actually driving the plot sometimes varies. Sometimes it's Nathan, sometimes it's Elena. And despite incorporating a lot of aspects that one might consider to be cliche or tropey, this story utilizes those things as tools to further deepen and expand the scope and emotion of its intention rather than lean on them. I mean, look, you get it. The architecting of this narrative is simply spectacular. I love this game and its story so much. So obviously the game has a great story, but that's not the only thing that makes up a great video game. So before we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about the gameplay. The baseline gameplay loop is split between arena cover shooter sections and platforming sections linked together with short exploratory transitional areas to let the player breathe and the occasional puzzle to solve. I don't recall where I heard this, but I do remember at some point someone telling me that the team was really influenced by the mechanics of 007 Everything or Nothing, which would make a lot of sense because they do feel similar in execution. And you've already heard me talk plenty about the game's jankier and less refined sections, but overall it actually does feel really great to play the vast majority of the time. More often than not, the cover system functions exactly as you'd expect it to. The way Drake moves and aims and fires also feels really great, but there are a few areas where the gameplay does feel a little unrefined. And a big part of that is specifically with the gunplay. In a game like this, where you'll be using firearms for 75% of the experience, it's pretty important that the guns feel good to use. And in Drake's fortune, they kinda don't. The bullet spread is horrendous. I guess you could argue that it's realistic because if you were just repeatedly jerking the trigger, the gun would be flinging around and bullets would be going everywhere unless you were trained, and Drake is supposed to be an everyman. But in terms of experience, it makes using these guns kind of frustrating. And in addition to that, they all sound really weak too, which, given the very high quality of the game's sound design in pretty much every other aspect, kind of stands out. They just don't sound like very powerful firearms. So those are some elements that I would criticize about the gameplay here. But one thing I do want to praise is the animation work. Referring back to that behind the scenes documentary again, the team actually went into detail about what a challenge it was to make the animations look realistic and believable, but also not hinder how it felt to play the games, particularly in the platforming sections. Like the way Nate climbs around and jumps across gaps like this, it doesn't look very human, but it does feel better to play like this. So I've got to give the team some credit for managing to strike a balance that both looks somewhat realistic and also feels good to play. And speaking of the climbing and platforming sections, like I've been saying, all of them feel great as well. Like, yeah, there's aspects of it all that feel a bit unpolished, but nothing here feels unfinished. The game is just utterly brilliant, and every time I play it, I have a great time. Just make sure you're playing it on easy unless you're looking to be frustrated. The only other aspect of the gameplay that I haven't talked about yet is that there is a little bit of a collectible system. Throughout each level, there's a plethora of little hidden treasures scattered throughout the environment for players to find. There's 60 of them in total, and they don't really do anything other than exist as fun collectibles to find, but the fact that they're all unique does make searching for them on repeat playthroughs kind of an engaging experience. And I also do like that it harkens back to Naughty Dog's kind of collectathon roots. And the last thing I want to talk about is, of course, the music. The score for Drake's Fortune was composed by Greg Edmondson, who was actually sought out specifically by Amy Hennig due to how much she enjoyed the score for the Firefly TV series. Since they wanted the score for Uncharted Drake's Fortune to be more unique and unorthodox, they knew they were going to have to seek out a composer that could kind of think outside of the box in terms of what instruments to use and how to use them. A classic orchestral Hollywood action score wasn't going to cut it for this. And of course, Greg Edmondson jumped at the opportunity. He was excited to try and compose something that focused more on instruments that you wouldn't hear in the foreground as much, figuring out different ways to make compelling action sequence music without leaning so heavily on the traditional orchestral elements that people were more used to hearing. And I would say that the results speak for themselves. Arguably one of the most impressive things about this score, however, is that all of it, everything was recorded on real instruments. Now that might sound obvious, but this was actually really close to a time where most soundtracks were hybrid between real instruments and MIDI. Even the soundtrack for Halo Combat Evolved, which is known as one of the best scores of all time, leaned really heavily on MIDI instruments. Yes, of course, some of it was live recorded original samples, but a lot of it was also MIDI. But what we got with Uncharted here is a completely organic, authentic, and unique soundtrack that's clearly pivotal to accentuating all of the aspects of this story. Clearly, Edmondson and his team did a killer job on this. And just like everything else on this game, it is top tier, done to the best that it could have been, and everything it needed to be for the experience to land.
In my final hour, I commend my soul to God. May he have mercy on this unholy place. Francis Drake.
Released in a time where pretty much every other game on the market was some variation of science fiction action game or grim military first-person shooter, Uncharted Drake's Fortune was offering up an interactive experience unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. From its great writing and charming characters to its tense action and epic set pieces, everything in Drake's Fortune was dialed in and left players satisfied but also wanting more. And really, I think that's how you know you nailed it. When you see those credits rolling and you feel like you got everything you asked for but can't wait for the next adventure, that's when you know you just experienced something special. So yeah, Uncharted Drake's Fortune is still incredible and remains one of my favorite games to date. And although I found myself walking away from it satisfied with what I'd gotten, I also couldn't wait to see what was next. Thanks everybody for watching, and let me know what you thought of this game down in the comments below. Make sure you take a look at that description for links to my Discord, Patreon, and YouTube memberships. That way you can get more invested in the channel and keep up with what content is coming next. I can't wait to see you guys in the next video, but until then, that's all I've got for you.